Hello Year 10, Mr. Mitchell here, and welcome to another geography lesson. We're going to start off today by writing the title, which is Urban Deprivation. And once you've done that, you can start having a think about what that word deprivation means and how it might link into our Birmingham unit of work. So once you've written the title down and you've had a think about that, we will be ready to move on and have a look at this key word. So that keyword deprivation, you might have come across it before. What it means is lacking something in your life which is considered essential by most people. So that might be, for example, a lack of housing, a lack of running water, a lack of food, a lack of clothing. Anything along those lines can be seen as deprivation if you don't have them. So our lesson today is going to be focused on how the levels of deprivation vary across a city. And of course, our city, our urban area case study is Birmingham. So we're going to be looking at how deprivation differs across the different areas of Birmingham. So before we move on, can you write down that key word deprivation and the definition that goes with it? We're going to be looking at different areas of Birmingham today, and that map on the left-hand side should be familiar to you because we looked at it when we were looking at the ethnic makeup of Birmingham. So do you remember we shaded in the map that looked just like that depending on which ethnic groups lived in certain places, and that's called a chloropleth map. The measures that we're going to be looking at in terms of deprivation are on the right-hand side in red, and they are unemployment, living in a deprived neighbourhood, pupils achieving 5A star to C grades, children living in poverty, and life expectancy. And those are the measures that we are going to compare in the different areas of Birmingham. And what we will find is that some areas have, for example, high unemployment, some areas have low unemployment, etc., etc. So we're going to look at those different areas and those different measures now. Here's our first chloropleth map, and this shows the unemployment levels in Birmingham. And if you look immediately in the middle, which you can't really read clearly, but it's Ladywood, that has the highest level of unemployment, and that's between 13 and 15%. And Ladywood is right in the centre of Birmingham, in the inner city. If you look towards the north of Birmingham, however, towards Sutton Coldfield, you will see that there's hardly any unemployment at all. It's only between 1 and 3%. So immediately, our first pattern that we can see is that Ladywood, that is in the inner city, has a much higher level of unemployment than Sutton Coldfield, which is actually in the outer suburbs. So that's our first pattern that we can see emerging to do with unemployment. If we now look at life expectancy, we can see a similar pattern emerging. So with life expectancy, the darker the areas that are shaded in, the higher the life expectancy. So again, if you look at Ladywood, for example, in the inner city, it's hardly shaded in at all. And the life expectancy, therefore, is between around about 75 and 76. However, if you look in the north at Sutton Coldfield, it's shaded in very dark, and the life expectancy is between 83 and 84. So again, Ladywood is obviously suffering. Ladywood has a higher level of deprivation because the life expectancy is lower. So again, the pattern that we see emerging, the inner city has more deprivation than the outer suburbs, e.g. Sutton Coldfield. Let's have a look at another measure and see if this pattern continues. We're going to have a look now at children in poverty, and I'm going to give you a few seconds just to see if you can work out the pattern that is seen in that map. So you've probably worked it out. Again, we can see, if you look at Ladywood in the centre, 44 to 51% of children live in poverty. If you look at Sutton Coldfield in the north, it's only 12 to 19%. So if we look at all three of these maps that we've looked at so far, and they're all on the screen now, you can see that where there is unemployment or high unemployment, there is a lower life expectancy. And where there is also unemployment, there is also more children living in poverty. So Ladywood is a much more deprived area than Sutton Coldfield so far. So let's carry on and have another look at a different measure. We're going to make this slightly more complicated now, and we're going to add in a new map. So on the right-hand side, in red, you can see the new map is pupils achieving 5 A star to C grades in their GCSEs. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to try and work out where the high exam results are achieved and where the low exam results are achieved. And then also, we need to start thinking about how we can link all of these maps together, because there is a way to link all of these together. So hopefully you've had a chance now to start thinking about that new map. And what you can see, again, Ladywood has got a much lower rate of exam passes than Sutton Coldfield in the north. So the exam results in Sutton Coldfield are much, much better. 78 to 84% of pupils are achieving 5 A stars to C, compared to just 50 to 56% in Sutton Coldfield. So can we link these maps together? Is there a link that we can say, right, the exam results aren't very good. Can we link that with unemployment? Can we link that with life expectancy? Can we link that with children in poverty? So you should now pause the video and spend a bit of time thinking about how you can link these maps together, and then resume the video when you think that you've worked out a link between them. So hopefully now you've been able to make some links between those maps. So for example, one of the links that we could make is the following. Pupils are not achieving very good GCSE grades in, for example, Ladywood. Therefore, you could say perhaps that is a reason why the unemployment is so high. That could be a link. In Sutton Coldfield, the children achieve much higher exam results where their unemployment is then lower. So we could also start linking unemployment and life expectancy. So for example, if you are unemployed, you have less money. And if you have less money, you can't afford nice food, you can't afford healthcare. So the areas that have high unemployment, which means that there are lots of people who don't have jobs, you can see that the life expectancy is lower. And again, those maps fit together. Ladywood has got high unemployment and a low life expectancy. Again, unemployment could be linked with children in poverty. If you're unemployed, you don't have a job, you don't have money, therefore your children are going to live in poverty. And again, Ladywood fits that link. Ladywood's got high unemployment, it's also got a lot of children living in poverty. Sutton Coldfield, on the other hand, has got low unemployment, therefore it's got low number of children living in poverty. So we can link these maps together in loads of different ways. Let's just throw in one final map before we move on to our main tasks. The final map that we're going to chuck in is living in a deprived neighbourhood. And you can see that map in orange on the right-hand side. Now we can see really clearly the areas that are in the inner city. So for example, Ladywood have got a much higher number of people living in deprived neighbourhoods. So they are lacking things like housing, good food, clothing, etc. If you look in the north, Sutton Coldfield, as we've seen throughout this lesson so far, in the inner and outer suburbs, there is a much lower number of people living in deprivation. So the clear pattern that we've got, inner city equals lots of deprivation. Suburbs equals a much lower amount of deprivation. So it is a much nicer place to live in the outer suburbs like Sutton Coldfield. So let's see if we've been able to follow what's been going on so far. What I would like you to do is to copy this table into your notes. And all you've got to do is to write down the words high or low as appropriate in that table. So we've got two different locations. We've got the inner city, e.g. Ladywood, and we've got the suburbs, e.g. Sutton Coldfield. And see if you can remember from the video whether or not the different measures are going to be high or low, and write them into the table. Now that we've done that task, we need to start thinking about why the inner city has got much higher levels of deprivation compared to the suburbs. So if we look at the land use model on the screen, remember the inner city is just outside the CBD, or the centre of the city, and yet the suburbs are much further out towards the edge of the city. This is an example of the land use that you might find in the inner city. Old, abandoned factories that are no longer functioning. And actually we can start thinking, well, hang on, that might be a reason why unemployment is high, because those factories are no longer working. And if they're no longer working, people don't have a job. And if they don't have a job, they don't have money. Therefore, they're more likely to be deprived. This is an example now of the housing that you might find in the inner city. Terraced houses that are slightly run down because no money's been spent on them. So, the factories closing down, the lack of industry, that has got a key definition. And it's a word that we've seen before when we started looking at the cattle markets closing down in Tenbury and Ludlow. Hopefully you might be able to work out what it is. That key term is deindustrialization, the closing down of factories and the closing down of industry. Deindustrialization also explains why the suburbs see much less deprivation at the moment than the inner city. Because if you remember, deindustrialization is the closing down of factories in the inner city, and they tend to move to the outer suburbs. So that industry is moving from the inner city to the suburbs. So all the jobs that are going to be available are more likely now to be in the suburbs. Therefore, you're more likely to get a job, you're more likely to have money, and therefore the deprivation goes down. So that term deindustrialization is really important when we're answering the question, why are the suburbs much less deprived than the inner city? So whereas deindustrialization causes problems in the cities, it actually causes the outer suburbs to get better. Because as we've said, the jobs move out to the outer suburbs, it means you're more likely to get a job, people have got more money, and therefore, what sort of houses do we find in the outer suburbs? Well, if you look at the picture at the bottom of the screen, big detached houses, you can see that is a much nicer place to live than the inner city. So deindustrialization, whereas it's killing the inner city, is actually helping the outer suburbs to get better. So what we're going to do now is we need to complete another task to see if we understand what we've been talking about so far in the lesson. This is our final written task for the lesson. And this is what you are going to need to upload on Teams on the assignment page so that I can just check that we understand what we've been doing in the lesson. So we're going to write a paragraph. And the question that we're going to answer is, explain the pattern of deprivation across Birmingham. The way that this is going to work is we're going to complete all of these tasks on the screen, and they all build on top of each other. So everyone will complete all of these tasks. So our success criteria. We should start off by saying what deprivation means, just by giving a definition. So nice and straightforward. Deprivation is, and you give your definition. We should then state where most and least of the deprivation is found in Birmingham. And you must make sure that you name your locations. So obviously our locations are Ladywood and Sutton Coldfield. What you then need to do is to quote data from those maps. So for example, you could say something along the lines of, for example, life expectancy in Ladywood is, unemployment in Ladywood is, and then you could go to the other side, however, or on the other hand, unemployment in Sutton Coldfield is much lower. For example, it is, and quote those figures. And you should also mention whether or not those locations are in the suburbs or the inner city. So hopefully by now you've realised Sutton Coldfield is in the suburbs, Ladywood is in the inner city. So you then build on what you've done there by explaining why deprivation is mainly found in the inner city. So hopefully you will be able to say something along the lines of, right, deprivation is found in the inner city because unemployment is high, therefore people don't have much money, therefore they can't afford things like nice food and nice lifestyles, therefore the life expectancy is much lower. But what I want you to do is use connectives to explain the effects of that high unemployment, low life expectancy, etc., etc. So you're going to try and go through all of those different measures and explain using connectives why deprivation is found in the inner city. The final challenge is to then link that pattern of deprivation to the urban changes caused by deindustrialization. So you could finish off by saying the reason why deprivation is so high in the inner city is mainly due to deindustrialization. This means that, and you could explain why deindustrialization is so bad in the inner city and why that causes deprivation, and then why actually it causes the outer suburbs to thrive. So you need to make sure that is a fairly lengthy paragraph. You're not going to be able to do this in 2 or 3 lines. It's going to be probably, I would say, half a side of A4 in your book. And you need to make sure that you either take a picture of it or you upload it as a Word document onto Teams. So that is it for this lesson. Please make sure you upload your work, and I will see you in our next lesson on Wednesday. Thank you very much. Stay safe and have a good rest of the day.